Everything's good. I mean, Jerry.
I'd like to call this February 15th, 2022 meeting of the Oxford Planning and Zoning Commission to order at 7:31 p.m. Start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Josh Manson, Luther Brian Shankar, Brian Humphries, Jesse Sharp, Kevin McCary, Steve McCary.
Jessica Hepnell.
Okay, see Josh, Ed.
Ed is on.
It's online. Oh, okay.
Andy.
All right, sorry about that. Okay. All right, we have a recess public hearing, B-21-133. Okay, no use public hearing. Move on to Z-22-014. Applicant and owner, TikTok Holdings LLC, Attorney Dominic Thomas, 350 Main Street, Derby, Connecticut. Proposed text amendment to zoning regulations. Article 3, general regulations, amend section 3.24 parking, general regulations. We have correspondence from Keith Rosenfeld, Regional Municipal Planning. Do we have that here, Jess?
Is this for the parking regulation?
Yes.
Yeah. One after the next one.
Okay, this is a staff referral report to the Planning and Zoning Commission, addressed to the PNC for selectmen and Administrator of Land Use of Oxford, Western Connecticut Council of Government, Connecticut Metropolitan Council of Governments, Naugatuck Valley Council of Governments, and the Regional Planning Commission representatives from Keith Rosenfeld, Regional Municipal Planner for NBCOG, date January 24th, 2022. Type of referrals for zoning, the applicant, the Town of Oxford Planning and Zoning Commission, description of proposal. The Oxford Planning and Zoning Commission is considering an amendment to Article 3, Section 3.24, and a new Section 3.24A of the Oxford zoning regulations pertaining to parking requirements in the town. The first set of amendment changes seeks to amend those requirements dedicated to the number of parking spaces required by sit-down restaurants, taverns, and bars, as well as those primarily takeout restaurants. The second amendment creates a section named shared parking, where it will be the commission who will determine a standard for shared parking at its sole discretion involving proposed multiple mixed developments, multifamily and or residential adjacent uses and developments. The staff recommendation is that NBCOG finds the zoning text amendment to Article 3, Section 3.24 and 3.24A of the Oxford zoning regulations pertaining to parking requirements is not regionally significant and presents no intermunicipal impacts.
Thank you. Okay, that's all the correspondence we have for this application.
Correct.
Okay. Todd. Proceed.
Thank you. Attorney Dominic Thomas, Corner Thomas, 215 Main Street, Connecticut, representing the applicant. As you are aware, that this is an application for proposed text change to the parking regulations. It is not a site-specific regulation, but is applicable to the parking regulations. Currently, for restaurants, taverns, and bars, if you all have my proposed change in front of you, you will see that all it says for parking is 1 per 100 square feet of GLA, gross leasable area, or 1 per 3 seats, whichever is greater. So what I did in analyzing that, which creates basically a one size fits all and doesn't take into consideration the type of restaurant use or take into consideration restaurants that are within mixed use facilities. I created a proposed regulation for 3.24 for that line item that addresses restaurants in 3 different categories, similar to what you have in Oxford, and this is a hybrid of other towns. The first one basically is a restaurant, cocktail lounge, or similar use primarily for the sale and consumption of food and beverage on the premises with more than 20 seats. And this would be a larger restaurant, and you have 1 space for each 150 square feet of gross leasable area, plus 1 additional space for each 50 feet of a patron bar and a cocktail lounge area. So it allows you to look at the floor plan and gives the commission some discretion to take a look at it and at what the uses are within the larger restaurants. However, there are also smaller restaurants operating in the same fashion. So those with 20 seats or less, 1 parking space for each 2 patron seats, plus 1 additional space for each 50 square feet of patron bar and a cocktail lounge area. So those are both sit-down restaurants. Now, in sit-down restaurants, you do know you have takeout, and certainly when you're considering it, you can't really rely on the takeout being the primary in most situations, but this is a relatively fair and relatively comprehensive parking regulation that is used in other communities. In addition to that, you have restaurant primarily for the sale of food and beverage consumed off premises with 20 seats or less. These would be the takeout restaurants. So for instance, not only would it be a restaurant with a drive-through, it could also be a restaurant that's pizza parlor that has very few seats. In fact, and it's 1 parking space for each 250 square feet of gross leasable area. So a lot of these type of restaurants are much smaller in size. And as a result, for instance, you can have a smaller pizza restaurant, a smaller coffee shop or something like that, where the people are going to either go through a drive-through or pull up, take out and leave, so the parking is less impact. In addition to that, and as a result of looking at the project that I was looking at when I did this, I noticed that your regulations did not have a shared parking regulation. Shared parking with multiple mixed uses is common in a lot of regulations at the present time. And it's important to give the commission the discretion to take a look at it in its standards. So I proposed a shared parking arrangement for mixed-use developments involving multiple non-residential or multifamily residential uses in combination with other appropriate non-residential uses. The commission may determine a standard for shared parking at its sole discretion, taking into account evidence presented to the commission of the peak parking times for the different uses and requirements for safe internal traffic. So, for example, where you have a proposed parking and a shared parking where you have uses that are, shall we say, morning to afternoon uses combined with other uses, for example, a sit-down restaurant that's normally an evening type use, you would be able to take that into account, and much to the disappointment of the asphalt plant owners, you will be able to place an appropriate amount of parking and not over asphalt the site. So it's relatively straightforward, and it is similar to what is in other regulations that I've encountered. Here to answer any further questions.
Anyone on the commission have a question? Thomas? Thank you. Sure. Go ahead.
No, what towns did you reference as far as these regulations?
I took a look at Charlton. I also looked at some other regulations. I looked at some regulations in I have so many regulations in mind, and so I looked at Monroe, I looked at Trump, I looked at others, but I looked at Shelton. Some of the communities to Oxford, but focusing on mainly in this situation, what you're focusing on is you're focusing on commercial areas. I wanted to be able to focus on commercial areas, and right now, at the present time, to be very frank, a lot of the parking regulations that exist are such that we created a lot of asphalt that isn't used in parking. So the question is to be able to look at, especially when you have mixed uses, to be able to have the commission to have discretion to look at mixed uses. On the other hand, if you look at for a full-size restaurant and others, there is more than enough parking, more than sufficient parking. I mean, your 1 per 100 square feet of gross leasable area is an extremely high ratio in most towns and counties. But on the other hand, what the regulations take into account, and what I found, like for instance, in Chuck, is they took into account bar patron area too, where you have seats where people could go in to a larger restaurant and sit at the bar. And so therefore, rather than just go with the 1 per 150 square feet, they also wanted, the ability to be able to count that and require that. But then again, they also do shared parking. A lot of the restaurants are located in larger commercial sites. So that is the ability for them to take a look at it. In that situation, they impose parking regulations as part of, like, for instance, plan development district. And they take into account shared parking.
Thank you.
So this is primarily for the application for Dunkin' Donuts.
No, this is a proposal, yeah, I mean, I represent that applicant. But yes, it's to address the issue for that this is something that will take place.
Without this amendment, they would have to apply for a variance because they don't have sufficient parking spaces under the regulation as they stand. Is that correct?
That is correct. Possibly, I haven't looked at any revised plans or anything like that. Again, it
Right.
is not site specific.
Yeah, I just wanted to know if it applied to the Dunkin' Donuts.
It would, well,
Kind of the
they would
reason-
come under category 3.
And if this wasn't granted, then they would have to apply for the variance.
I don't know that because I haven't seen the revised plans. I know there were revised plans, but I haven't.
Unless they reduce the parking spaces, then they would, if they maintained it the last time when you were here, you had indicated that there was a problem with the number of parking
Right,
spaces.
they would if they maintained
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
So my whole problem with this is that, how does a developer, when they're coming in, know how to understand this regulation? There doesn't seem to be any criteria other than we're going to determine at our sole discretion, taking into account evidence presented to the commission. How
That's
does
only the
how does a
should-
developer,
that's only the should.
how does a
That's only the should.
developer understand that?
Huh?
How does a developer understand that type of regulation? It says, we're gonna come up with a number that we. deem-
Well, I'll give you an example. When I probably respect more of this than anybody, if I own a mixed use project, for example, it's my job to present evidence to the commission. So in a larger mixed use project, when the commission wanted 5.0 for gross square feet of retail and wall area in the development, I got my client in that situation and that was the standard they put in, and I wanted to amend it. So I came in with a proposal for shared parking and got my client to hire a drone company. And basically, the drone company did a survey over 2 or 3 weeks and shot pictures of the parking lots at noon, 3, 6, and 7:30.
So
And showed
the
the
developer
flow
did
of
that.
Huh?
The developer had to go out and hire a drone and.
Well, yeah, I mean,
And then if there was a problem with the commission, we would have to go out and hire a drone and come up with our own.
no,
Or we just let the developers make the regs for us.
No, as a commission for shared parking, you would say to the developer, I want these standards, why, we're talking about 3-24, that's the only issue.
And that's my problem, Dominic, and I appreciate that, but if we just start telling developers, no, we want this amount, we're gonna wind up in court, because in order to do that, we need a standard to evaluate, to say, this is the number of spaces that are required under our regs, as opposed to it just saying, it's up to us at our sole discretion. This, to me, just appears, and I don't know if Attorney Maturi wants to opine on this. This just seems to be an opening for litigation and confusion. How does a property owner that lives next door to one of these or has a business next door know what's going in? There's no standard on
Oh, this has nothing to do with use. This has to do with in a shared parking situation, when somebody comes before you in a project that has multiple uses on the site, rather than enhance the income of asphalt companies
it. Yeah,
by adding together all the uses without taking into account, and most commissions I've before have the ability to take into account where there's shared parking. So for example, if they came before you, this allows you the discretion in a shared parking situation. And so this has nothing to do with the project that I'm involved in.
my point is, the next door neighbor to this shared use
Right.
would have no understanding of what's gonna ultimately arrive, what will be permissible without actually seeing the application come
I don't-
forward.
Okay, a person next to it would know exactly what the uses are, because the uses are in the zoning regulations. What
No,
would happen,
No, you misunderstood the question. I mean, so there's a new application coming in, we're trying to determine how many parking spaces.
right, yeah,
There's no way to know until,
it's presented and there's facts to show how the shared uses are not a situation where you would add the number of spaces for each use.
so generally engineers, when they make these types of determinations and commissions, the facts come before them, and then there's some kind of standard to evaluate those facts, other than just the sole discretion.
Commissioner Curran, with all due respect, these regulations exist throughout the state of Connecticut and they're not changing. It gives them discretion.
That doesn't say much, though.
So
Okay, all right, well, that's all I can tell you.
in the past, we dealt with, what was called a parking management plan that was submitted by the applicant. That would come under this shared.
No, the
That's
parking
in the-
management plan is in
That's
the
in the
Quarry Walk development.
Yeah,
And that
that's
was
in the,
done based on information that was submitted by the engineer that we should have probably evaluated a little more. This is just, this has nothing to do with that. This is just,
Well, no, but it's a similar.
when there's a shared park, when there's a single use. This 3-24.2A doesn't come into play at all.
this doesn't have anything to do with the Quarry Walk, what we
Well,
did
no,
down there.
Yeah.
I didn't say it did.
Yeah.
I didn't mention Dory Walk.
Yeah.
I mentioned parking management plans.
Which was submitted in the Quarry Walk.
That's one of the places it's been submitted.
And that's approved under those regulations. And that would have nothing to do with this.
I guess the best example I can give you is that in many urban communities, when you talk about discretion, if parking, if you have a use, even a single use, within X number of feet of public parking, the commission has the right to reduce it up to, which is totally within the discretion of the commission, 25% in some cases, 20%. So you
There's a
have,
percentage there that you can apply. Here, there is no.
no, it says up to.
Yeah,
No
up
application.
to, but there's a limit and a range. Here, there is no limit. It's just the sole discretion.
Certainly, this commission would have the ability to approve this regulation and not approve 3.24.2A if you felt you didn't know was insufficient standard.
I realize that.
Rick, you had a.
Well, that's what I was just gonna say, like, would you have a concern if we split the two, meaning like we didn't approve 3.24A? If that's what the commission.
That's something else.
That's what I'm saying.
That's
No, no, but I didn't know if, you know, this was all in one or what.
The only reason I put it in there was because most towns have shared parking arrangements now, they're very common, in an effort to reduce the amount of asphalt and thereby increase green space within projects. So that's the main purpose of it.
And
because-
Dominic, I think that's a great idea. My problem is that you're throwing out the baby with the bathwater. The language is a little too big, too broad.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner Grant. Is there any other one with a comment?
I think council had something.
I think, I think, in fairness to Attorney Thomas, I think he did assess it correctly from the standpoint of mixed-use development is something that's on the rise. And eliminating asphalt. And I think Commissioner Kerwin's also correct in that having some additional standards put into that rate would help us in doing a checkoff list so that we made sure that every mixed-use development had the same balanced throughout. And I look at the regulation and we're more comfortable with a set of standards that we could follow through rather than having a wide swath, because I think that sometimes can create issues for us. And I understand what Attorney Thomas's point is, which is a lot of regulations do have language exactly like this. But I think you're more comfortable saying we need this many spaces that are going to be shared in mixed use.
I did do a Westlaw search. Some of that language didn't actually survive appellate review, so, yeah, and that's the issue, where there's no discretion, or where it's just broad discretion without some kind of quantifiable standard. We run the risk of just, creating an unconstitutional.
I will just leave it on a point. There are 3 standards in this already. Peak parking times, different uses, and the requirements for safe internal traffic. So there are standards. You can certainly, you want to put more in there, it makes it easier because.
Like define what a peak parking is. I think that would be a good point, that we might want to, that was going to be what we could, that was going to be my next point, for you to check, but I think we should probably, this has to be reviewed a little bit, we need a little bit more quantifiable standards than sole discretion.
Certainly, you have the right to approve it, and I would pressure to approve at least the restaurant uses, which I think are a lot more realistic.
Attorney Thomas, on the second standard, which is the cocktail lounge with 20 seats or less, there's no square footage that you put in there. Could you just explain that to the commission, the reasoning?
Well, it's based on the number of seats. Certainly, you can add square footage on it, but it was based on the number of seats. Normally, when you have a restaurant or cocktail lounge with that few seats, I suppose I should preface it by saying if we're in another pandemic, and we have to be 6 feet apart, I suppose it could be a larger building. But other than that, normally when you have 20 seats or less, you're talking about a relatively small, either, tavern, or you're talking about a restaurant that's a boutique, La Petite Cafe in Brantford, for instance, that has like 15 seats or something like that, very small table. So I was trying to take that away from the larger restaurants, which, I'm trying to think, the typical larger restaurant that's in a standalone situation.
Thank you.
Just to add my own opinion here, I think that seating capacity is more relevant than square footage. How many,
I think you brought up the point.
no, I'm addressing the group.
Yeah.
No person in particular.
All right, so
I'm addressing the rest of my fellow commissioners and our council. I think personally that, seating capacity, which is determined by the fire marshal, so it's a fixed number that we can always work off of. So, somebody, this room has a certain number of, that's it, that's all that's allowed in here. So that to me is more relevant than figuring the square footage and how many parking.
seating capacity and occupancy. Probably what you're referring to here is occupancy as opposed to seating capacity. This room has an occupancy established by the fire marshal. It probably seats a lot less.
Well, yeah, but I think
And like bars will have a occupancy level, they don't have seating capacity.
Fine.
A bar, I know this, because that's what I do for a living.
yeah.
The fire marshal.
Those are bars, or-
Yeah, I drink a lot. I was drinking this morning. And I saw the occupancy.
The best example I can give you on that, because I was involved in it, was when I was involved at the beginning of THC, the hospital. People were doing it, the occupancy was over 400 something. That was the occupancy. The seating, in other words, the client could only seat 250, 300, you know what I mean, and that situation. So that as Commissioner Cronin pointed out, fire marshal's occupancy number, you would end
But I
up
get Pat's point.
in a lot more
The
parking.
point is, you know, as P.T. Barnum said, asses in the seats or asses in the stands, as opposed to just square footage.
Yeah.
Square footage can be a little vague,
Yeah, that was,
and I meant asses in the sense of dog.
yeah, of course. Is there anyone else in the commission before we go to the public?
Yeah, great.
Any more commissioners online?
Do any of our commissioners online have a question? Nope. Okay, then let's go to the public. Is there anyone in the public who would like to comment on this? Is there anyone in the public who would like to comment on this? Is there anyone in the public that would like to comment on this? Hearing none, back to the commission.
No, I gotta say that our parking regulations for the last few years is good. We have special sections under there that we can change at our discretion. I really don't see any reason to change anything. You know, we were working off them, which were walking
From the time there were horses pulling wagons, yes, we have been working on them.
and they didn't serve the town well.
Anyone else?
Can I just ask one question?
Sure.
Did the town engineer review this? Did you get any input from?
Not as a text. The application.
No, well, I'd ask him to maybe take a look at what he thought. This is the kind of thing that he would have to then evaluate to give us. So that would be one thing I would. want to see.
Okay, then why don't we send this off to and ask for an opinion in writing, of course. Anything else? Anything? Okay, then in that case, we'll have to recess till,
Next meeting is March 1st.
okay. I'll take a motion to recess this application on March 1st. So moved. Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Thank you. Number 2.
Go ahead. Item number 2, Z-22-015, applicant and owner Marcus Laurier, care of attorney Dominic Thomas, for a proposed text amendment to zoning regulations, Article 5, new section 5.3.5, Article 10, new section 10.12, and amend Article 17.2.1. And we do have correspondence, a staff referral report from Keith Rosenfeld, regional municipal planner for NV Cog.
Read that.
I'll read that. Let's see, to the Planning and Zoning Commission, et cetera, as far as the number of people from Keith Rosenfeld, dated January 28, 2022. Type of referral zoning applicant Marcus Laurier, care of attorney Dominic Thomas. Description of proposal. The Town of Oxford Planning and Zoning Commission is considering the zoning regulation text amendment to Article 5, Section 5.3, Article 10, and Article 17, Section 17.2.1 of the Oxford zoning regulations pertaining to farm events. The intent of the proposed amendment change is to permit active farms in Oxford additional sources of income, thus allowing them to maintain existing farming land use activities per a new special exception approval from the Oxford Planning and Zoning Commission. Additional uses can include catered events not to exceed 300 attendees, holiday themed events, farm fairs, equestrian activities. Live music is an additional component to the proposed amendment, with an amendment providing conditions per their required hours, decibel levels, and locations on the property. Required parking shall be provided for a maximum of 150 spaces for attendees, with additional spaces provided for employees, vendors, etc. Alcohol can be served and consumed in a residential zone like those requirements provided for farm wineries. Staff recommendation. A quick review of the number of active farms Oxford reveals several properties that qualify or could qualify for consideration by the P&Z. Of those parcels, some are located within a proximity to other NVCOG or other COG communities. With this new introduction of traffic, music, and attendees to Oxford's outlying rural residential neighborhoods, NVCOG staff finds the proposed zoning amendments not to be regionally significant, but may present significant intermunicipal impacts.
There's also a letter from the Connecticut Farm Bureau. Just read,
Yeah,
covers you.
I want to read the letter.
Yes.
Okay. This is from the Connecticut Farm Bureau to Chairman Patrick Cottrell, as well as the Planning and Zoning Commission, dated February 9th, 2022, regarding the zone text change proposal. Dear Chairman Cottrell and members of the Oxford Planning and Zoning Commission, please accept this letter of support for the above mentioned text amendment to the Oxford Planning and Zoning Commission. Please read this letter into the record at the upcoming public hearing. Connecticut Farm Bureau Association supports the proposed text amendment as written. Agritourism, both here in Connecticut and across the Northeast, has become a viable option for diversifying farm income. Income from agriculturally related events, as well as non-agricultural events, help sustain the farm through the ebbs and flows of the farming season. Opening farms to the public helps educate the non-farming community about life on the farm and the value that agriculture and farming brings to the community and the state. Farms provide open space and a wholesome venue for family events. According to the 2017 U.S. Ag Census, over 230 Connecticut farms derive some form of income from agritourism. According to a September 2017 UConn study, Economic Impacts of Connecticut's Agricultural Industry, total output from local food sales and agritourism was 90 million in 2015, and these sectors created approximately 800 jobs in the state, almost 30 million in wages. Allowing farms in Oxford to conduct agritourism under a well-defined set of zoning regulations will help the sustainability of Oxford farms, contribute to the local economy, and provide a framework for the town to administer these activities. Connecticut Farm Bureau Association is a member servicing nonprofits representing nearly 2,500 Connecticut farm families across all commodities. Respectfully submitted, Joan Nichols, Executive Director.
Thank you. Is there any other correspondence? Not that, no. Okay.
Thank you. Attorney General Thomas Corner, Thomas, 15 Main Street, Derby, Connecticut, representing the applicant. As was stated in the purpose of this regulation change is to allow farms in the town of Oxford to be able to do activities to generate income to support the farm. Farms are often considered bucolic, near a farm. But I want to begin by reading something. Notwithstanding any general statute, municipal ordinance, or regulation pertaining to nuisances to the contrary, no agricultural or farming operation, place or establishment or facility, or any of its purposes, or the operation thereof shall be deemed to constitute a nuisance, either public or private, due to alleged objectionable odor from livestock, manure, fertilizer, or feed. 2, noise from livestock or farm equipment used in normal and generally accepted farming procedures. 3, dust created during plowing or cultivation operations. 4, the use of chemicals, provided such chemicals and methods in their application conform to practices approved by the Commission of Environmental Protection, or where applicable, the Commission of Public Health. Or 5, water pollution from livestock or crop production activities, except the pollution of public water, private drinking supply, provided such activities conform to acceptable management practices for pollution control, provided by DEP. Provided such agricultural or farming operation, place or establishment, facility has been in operation for 1 year or more. And it goes on to talk about inspections by the Commissioner of Agriculture. What I just read to you is the town of Oxford right to farm ordinance, which has been adopted by a lot of towns. Why? Because people have the impression that farms work in power. That I live near a farm, so it should be peaceful. Until, of course, the deer gun went off at 4:30 in the morning. Or the tractor rolled up early in the morning and the dust spread. Or the manure was spread at an appropriate time when we had a little bit of a heat wave and at 90 degrees and the wind moved in the wrong direction. The complaints started coming. The farmers are very conscious about that. So I begin with this just to point out that I'm proposing activities that are not new. And this is not an earth-shaking regulation changes. Oxford is not in the forefront of this in any fashion. But the fact of the matter is that towns like Oxford, Monroe, Newtown, I can just go down the list, Griswold, have chosen to adopt right to farm ordinances to protect the farm. Agribusiness, agriculture, whatever you want to call it, is a way also to protect the farmers. And it is to support the farmers. Now, can it be unfettered? No, of course not. Can it be, for instance, like what occurs in wetlands with farming, where farming is exempt, farming activities are to a great extent exempt from wetlands regulation. That's not what we are proposing. Farms that do not survive economically often become subdivisions, or, and this is what happens more recently, because I was involved in one of these, they become a solar farm. And then people object to the fact that they're a solar farm. Many people, some don't, but many people do. When, and I was involved in, I think, with the largest solar farm, I represented them as the neighbors, so I got to see all the applications. And one of the interesting documents that was submitted as part of the application before the siting council was a lengthy report by the Connecticut Department of Agriculture analyzing the loss of farmland and the loss of the farmland to a solar farm. I mean, we're talking about a 19.8 megawatt. We're not talking about something small, acres upon acres. And obviously, that economically, the farm, the family sold it off because this was a much better deal for them. The letter you read is from the Farm Bureau, it really cuts to the point. Now, with that, in gathering it, I also presented to you the a regulation that exists in the town of Griswold. And you should have all hopefully received a copy of it. It is a lengthy regulation. It's a very rural community, similar to Oxford as far as rural nature and farming. And you'll notice in the lengthy regulation, if you go to, I want to make sure, I believe it's on the, begins on the second page, which would be page 8 of the regulation, subsection F. As accessory to the principal farming use is defined in section 4.2.5, the farming premises may be used for such uses as weddings, wedding receptions, birthday parties, nuptial showers, barbecues, cross-country funny events, craft shows, and similar type of uses. Said facilities may contain structures, etc. And then they go down, and there's a substantial list of standards that have to be considered when you're doing it. And it talks about the fact of parking, it talks about buffers, it talks about the that these are catered facilities. It talks about the timing, accessory uses under this subparagraph may commence at 7 a.m. and shall terminate at 10 p.m. Provided any activity that is an accessory use of our bands, music, and or serving the use of alcohol beverages may commence at 9 a.m. and terminate at 10 a.m. Notice that they can do that, I want to point this out, 7 days a week. Whereas the regulation that I presented contained further limitation. And you can go on and you can review it. And the whole point of this, as you see later on, is that the regulation provides for plan review and approval by the commission. And that is, in your case, our proposal is for a special exception. Now, allowing agri-tenure under controlled land use circumstances is not unusual. There are farming activities that can generate enormous traffic that actually require police to come. If any of you have picked strawberries at Jones or Blue Hills, which extends from June to pretty much the end of July into August. Now that is a farming activity, but it's these pick your own things can create a lot of traffic. So they have to be controlled. Fairview Farm. It's another farm that from middle of September through the end of October, they have some thousands upon thousands of people in the middle of a residential area. Go to the farm and they go through one of the most sought after haunted rides as it goes through the woods with all these scary things in it. Not related to farming, but it is something that does generate a substantial amount of income to support the farm. The proposal before you would allow such similar activities coming before and attempting and getting approval for a special exception. The farms, subject to the restrictions that are in there, they want to have Halloween activity. At a prior informal session, one of the, when I pointed out about the equestrian activities, it was, well, you can do that on the farm. Well, look at your own regulations and you can't. You can board horses. And boarding horses is clearly been considered farming. There's a court case which is determined as farming, but nothing about equestrian activities. For example, as you notice in the Griswold thing, we talked about races and everything like that. Equestrian activities could be jumping competitions. The other competitions relating to horses. The regulation permits activities similar to that in the Griswold, but actually establishes more control that is in that. The proposal before you that I have presented to you limits sure. Obviously limits the number of activities, limits it to 300 attendees. If it's catered events, it limits it to 10 per year, to only 10 per year, provided there is sufficient parking in the buffers. It allows for holiday-themed events on the farms. It allows for fairs related to farming activities, and allows for equestrian activities, competitions, training, and boarding. The requirements that you have are carried through then, that's in the uses within Residence District A. The requirements are then carried into a new section in Article 10.12, farm events. And under that, you have the same uses required and the standards only on farms of 20 acres or more. There must be minimum frontage on a town road or state highway of 200 feet. And there must be setbacks to the designated event area. In other words, anybody coming before you must designate the event area. That is not even something that's in the Griswold thing, but something that's more protected here. And that must be 250 feet from a town road or highway, 250 feet from any property line of any property within abutting residential use. Not even a residential zone, just a residential use. Provided that the commission has the discretion to permit existing fire buildings or farming or equestrian activity within that 250-foot setback. Off-street parking. And you notice there's a parking regulation in the visual regulation, as they talk about the fact that the parking can be processed and everything like that. Well, we're required to have 150 spaces. Parking areas can be located within 150 feet from the property line. And they are not required to conform to the requirements of Article 3, Section 3.24.3, which are the size of the aisles and everything like that, provided that we have to ensure that the traffic pattern and parking areas meet basic safety standards, including emergency access. And then, with respect to any events, music, which is, as you know, an issue and addressed in the Griswold regulation, is permitted after 7 p.m. other than on a, no music is permitted after 7 p.m. other than on a Friday or Saturday. So only that. So we can't have it during the week or anything like that. Any events that were held during the week. Somebody could have a birthday party or an event during the week, but not, or even on Sunday, but they can't have it in the evening. And no music may continue after 10 p.m. No activity generating a decibel level greater than 55 or approximately with a residential use may continue after 10 p.m. And as a part of the approval, the commission may place conditions on limits on any music location, which is again, not even in the Griswold regulation, but puts the regulation in there. And then it states out the application requirements and deals with the issue in 17.2.1 concerning alcoholic beverages, which is again addressed in the regulation. So basically, this kind of a procedure, this kind of a regulation, is something to, again, not invent, but it's something to allow farms to generate additional income, as the Connecticut Farm Bureau said, to sustain themselves. Because if they don't sustain themselves, as you all know, they become subdivisions, they become solar farms or whatever, and we lose agricultural land. The people that are going to do this are not giving up the farming activity that they're doing. They're using it to support themselves. But they're doing so in such a way that there are controls. And those controls are through the commission and through the application and through the standards, which are substantial. With that, that basically is my presentation. I'm prepared to answer any questions.
What I'm going to do is go directly to the public, because this is obviously going to stay open to the commission after they digest on what the public has to say.
I think that's a great idea.
Okay, so do we have a list? Jesse?
So the first one on the list will be Peter Olson. And when you come up, please state your name and address very clearly. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Peter Olson. I'm an attorney with an office in Bethel at 275 Greenwood Avenue. My firm name is Land Use and Conservation Counsel. In the interest of disclosure, I have in the past served as legal counsel to this commission. Obviously, I'm not here in that role tonight. I am here on behalf of Jennifer Camaro and Eric Renato, who are owners of property located at 37 Reality Road. They've engaged me to present an opposition to this text amendment. My clients own their home at 37 Reality Road. It's located just one property away from a large parcel of land owned by this applicant on Newgate Road. As such, they are concerned with the potential activities which may result if this commission was to approve this text amendment to allow those activities to occur in their neighborhood all year long. In my opinion, as a land use attorney for 26 years, it is unwise to adopt this text amendment as presented. as an augmentation to the Residence District A zone in Oxford, which encompasses the vast majority of land within the town. I have a copy of the zoning map for the town of Oxford, which I would like to submit for the record. I apologize that my color printer decided today was a good day to take a vacation. And so I have one color map for you and the rest of them. It's obviously far more evident on the color map of the town, which shows the residential A district in a pale yellow color and takes up most of the town. Despite the limiting language in the proposed text amendment that allows the use that is proposed only to occur on properties that are 20 acres in size, this in fact means that the amendment will apply to many parcels across the town in the Residence A district, and therefore have sweeping impacts across the town. A quick check of the GIS map for the town shows over 175 properties in town that are in excess of 20 acres. Obviously, some of these are located in the other districts, some are owned by the town, and some are already put to commercial uses. But there are still a very significant number of properties that can take advantage of the proposed zoning. Before I get into any of the details, I think it's important that the commission understands what its obligation is when it is considering an amendment to the zoning regulations. As a zoning commission, you are authorized under General Statutes 8-2 and 8-3 to adopt and amend zoning regulations for the town. When you do so, you act in a legislative capacity. So long as you follow the rules set out in the statutes, you can adopt zoning regulations to say pretty much whatever you want. You have all the discretion that is available to you to approve or deny text amendments and map amendments, because that's what legislatures do. They make up the law. And that's the capacity you sit in. General Statutes 8-2 provides some guidelines for you. Otherwise, absent fraud or bias or general crookedness, you can do pretty much whatever you want. Your power in reviewing this amendment and your power to deny it, which is what we're asking you to do tonight, is almost absolute. As I mentioned, General Statutes 8-2 does provide some standards for you, and I want to emphasize a few of those standards. When adopting regulations, they shall be designed to lessen congestion in the streets, to secure safety from fire, panic, flood, and other dangers, to promote health and the general welfare, to provide adequate light and air, to prevent the overcrowding of land, to avoid undue concentration of population, and to facilitate the adequate provision for transportation, water, sewerage, schools, parks, and other public requirements. Such regulations shall be made with reasonable consideration as to the character of the district and its peculiar suitability for particular uses, and with a view to conserving the value of buildings and encouraging the most appropriate use of land throughout such municipality. That's from General Statutes 8-2, and that provides parameters for you in adopting and amending. These are key points which should demonstrate to you that denial of this application is the only correct course of action. In addition to these directives, the case law has set forth some standards for zone amendments, both text amendments and map amendments, which you must follow. This is from the Supreme Court. The test of the action of the commission is twofold. The zone change must be in accord with a comprehensive plan. And two, it must be reasonably related to the normal police power purposes enumerated in section 8-2. A comprehensive plan is a general plan to control and direct the use and development of property in a municipality or a large part thereof by dividing it into districts according to the present and potential use of the properties. The requirement of a comprehensive plan is generally satisfied when the zoning authority acts with the intention of promoting the best interests of the entire community. The best description I've ever heard of what a comprehensive plan is in this context is that it reflects the plan of the municipality as it is found on the ground, where you have your resident zones, where you have your business zones, where you have your industrial zones, etc. I do not believe that it can be reasonably said that introducing large-scale commercial uses, as are proposed by this proposed amendment, into residential zoning districts meets this standard. The comprehensive plan is not, despite the nomenclature, the town's plan of conservation and development, which you are required to prepare and enact every 10 years. Yours is from 2018. Despite it not being a comprehensive plan, as I just outlined, the statutes do have an additional requirement for you and require you to make specific findings for every text or map amendment that it is consistent with the plan of conservation and development. Written findings, like that. I went through your plan of conservation and development today, and it makes no mention of any use similar to that being proposed by the applicant. It has one page where it talks about agricultural land, which has great language pretty close to what was identified by Attorney Thomas about the importance of agricultural uses. This is page 37 of the plan of conservation and development. Talks about Oxford's longstanding agricultural heritage, a loss of dairy farming, an important agricultural flavor to the town of Oxford. There's nothing in here that talks about adding 300-person catered events to uses that are currently farm uses. Your plan of conservation and development does mention the town's right to farm ordinance, which Attorney Thomas read from at length. I would like to submit a copy of that for the record. The language which Attorney Thomas read is from the statutes. And I guess I would agree with everything he read as being correct. However, there's none of those standards that talk about 300-person catering events with 150 vehicles as part of farming. Sure, activities that augment the farm, but not the farm. And therefore, this right to farm ordinance that the town has that protects farms from nuisances, from nuisance claims from neighbors, has nothing to do with the proposals before you tonight. Otherwise, there's nothing in the plan of conservation and development that would support the proposed use. And you can't make a finding that the amendment is consistent with the plan of conservation and development. All of the foregoing demonstrates that the commission has complete discretion to simply deny this application as inappropriate for the residential zone. Without conceding this general proposition, obviously we think you should deny the application. I want to go through the regulation as proposed and point out a number of flaws with it. I think those flaws mean that you should flat out deny the application, but at the very least, you need to fix the flaws to mitigate the effect that this proposed text amendment will have on the residential zoning district and the uses will have on the neighboring property owners. As pointed out in the letter from the Connecticut Farm Bureau, a well-defined regulation can assist farmers. This is not that. This is not a well-defined regulation. The first point I want to start with is the question of noise. Regulations do not comply with the noise ordinance of the town of Oxford. Which I'm going to hand you. In particular, I would refer you to the distinction in the definitions in the noise ordinance of daytime and nighttime hours. In particular, nighttime hours are between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. Sunday evening through Friday, and between 9 a.m. and 8 p.m. Saturday morning through Sunday evening. The noise ordinance contains decibel limitations based on what hour of the day we're talking about, and it's a difference of 10 decibels for residential properties between 55 and 45 decibels. The zoning regulation presented to you ignores this and presents its own noise regime where it's allowed to have music amplified to about 55 decibels on Saturday evenings in direct violation of the noise ordinance. Regulation does not require, as part of the special exception application, that the applicant demonstrate that the operation will fully comply with the noise ordinance before it's approved by this commission, leaving instead for it to be enforced by the zoning enforcement officer, obviously primarily weekend evenings at 8 p.m. and or the resident state trooper on a case-by-case basis while the impacts are going, because that's how you enforce ordinance-based citations. The impacts will be ongoing. I don't think it's reasonable to expect the zoning enforcement officer to be monitoring the noise going on in this property every single weekend for the entire season. Nor is it reasonable to expect neighbors to be calling the resident state trooper on every Saturday night and using it too loud. At the very least, the regulation has to require that the applicant demonstrate as part of the special exception application that the noise ordinance will be complied with. The regulation attempts to create a new testing regime to determine whether or not the noise is sufficiently below the limitation or not, rather than relying on the noise ordinance that the town has already adopted that tells you precisely how you measure noise and noise violations. So on this basis alone, the regulation should be denied. At the very least, it needs to be changed drastically to incorporate the law that the town already has. In this regard, I will confess that I myself have picked strawberries at Jones Farm on many occasions, and I can tell you there are no concerns with amplified voices in music late into the weekend nights. Second, the use proposed by this amendment, which has a limitation of 300 attendees on weekends, makes no provision for the traffic impacts of the proposals. 150 parking spaces is a limit that's proposed, no provision for traffic impacts. The zoning regulations do contain special exception criteria, which will apply to every special exception application, which will require a traffic study because 150 parking spaces is above the threshold in that regulation for a traffic study. But it makes no provision for the idea that throughout the residence district in the town, many roads are simply not capable of handling that level of traffic. I'm going to submit to you a map that's prepared by the Connecticut Department of Transportation. That is a road classification for the town of Oxford. Again, as I noted, my color printer decided today was the day to jam and not do the print, so you can't see the colored roads. The shaded area is what they call urbanized area, and the non-shaded area is non-urbanized. And what you can see is that the vast majority of the roads, including Newgate Road, are characterized by the State Department of Transportation in the lowest category, which is a local road. In my opinion, if the commission is to consider this regulation at all, at a minimum, this use should not be permitted throughout the residence zoning district A, but rather should only be permitted on roads that are classified as minor or major collector roads or minor arterial roads. Those are the big roads in the town. And that those can handle the traffic. Some of them are state highways, Route 67 and 88. But it reflects the quality of the road and its ability to handle traffic. At a minimum, that should be required. The regulation itself is pretty internally inconsistent as to the number of events that are allowed per year. It's unclear whether it's 10 or 20. It's unclear whether a holiday themed event, which can be frankly as impactful as a catered event, counts towards the 20 or the 10. But either way, what you see in the regulation is that there will be at a minimum an event every single weekend from May 12th. There's no break for the residents, no break for the neighborhoods. They have to deal with the impacts of this every single week. Again, as I pointed out with the noise ordinance, it's not reasonable to expect that the zoning enforcement officer is able to enforce limitations such as this, either the number of attendees, 300, or the number of events per year. What happens when we get to November and all of a sudden there's an 11th catered event? What's the zoning enforcement officer supposed to do? He's supposed to track it all year long to know exactly when that 11th event kicks in? What happens if there's 310 people who come to this? What happens if there's 400 people? Again, on a Saturday, how are you supposed to enforce this regulation as written? Even if you could determine that a violation had occurred, the remedy is to issue a cease and desist order, which the applicant, the property owner, then has 30 days to appeal to the zoning board of appeals. And then the zoning board of appeals has to conduct a public hearing on it. By the time we have a decision from the zoning board of appeals, it's 4 months later, the season's over, it's January 1, and the time resets. We in the law call this something that is capable of repetition, yet avoiding review. After that point, if the zoning board of appeals upholds the cease and desist, the property owner can take an appeal report. The town is required to bring an injunction action, to bring enforcement action. We end up spending a lot of money and a lot of time trying to enforce what are requirements in more regulations. And that makes it a bad regulation. Regulation sets forth that a site plan is required, but then says the commission, in some circumstances, can waive the requirement for a site plan. You had some discussion earlier tonight on what discretion the commission can have in regulations. I happen to believe that some discretion is okay for a commission in these things, but the ability to waive requirements that are statutory in nature does not exist within the commission. You cannot have a requirement that says you can just do away with something. If you feel- Again, it means that the regulation should be denied as written. And then finally, I want to address sale of alcohol. This is the definition of a farm winery, which requires a liquor permit from the state. But as you can see, the number of activities that are allowed under that liquor permit are fairly extensive. And I think the one that really always gets me is the sale at retail from the premises of wine or brandy by the glass and bottle to visitors on the premises of the farm winery for consumption on the premises. There's no requirement that that the produce be grown on the farm, that it be manufactured on the farm. Essentially, it just means you can sell anything that is made in Connecticut. I think that's extremely broad, and I think that what you will end up having happen here is that the farm winery portion of it will be available on multiple days throughout the year, not just on catered events. You're essentially allowing the opening of bars, pubs in your residential districts. And that is problematic. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have on the presentation that day. I don't have any other comments tonight. My clients have signed up to speak, and I know there's an additional residents from the neighborhood who have letters and comments for you. Thank you very much.
I'd like to continue with the audience.
I think that is-
Share the comments.
Yeah, we can hold it.
Is that okay?
Whatever.
Okay.
So the next person is Jennifer Camaro. Again, when you come up, please state your name and your address.
My name is Jennifer Camaro. I live at 37 Yonge Road in Oxford. I'm an Oxford resident. I own that property. My home is located behind 81 Gate. Last summer, the owners of 81 Gate held several large events and weddings. We did report these events to Planning and Zoning Commission, as well as the Ethics Commission. The large weddings that were held at the property, which I believe also goes by Sion Hill, Common Oak, were completely inappropriate activity to have in the middle of a residential neighborhood. We bought a residential home in a residential neighborhood, asking to change the zoning to allow a large and noisy commercial enterprise is really going to destroy my quality of life and my home value. Who would want to live next to that music all the time and the traffic? At my house this summer, we could hear the music outside and inside. And the music would often go past 10 p.m., which you acknowledge when you came to my house. We could hear the names of the wedding party, we could hear the wedding toast, and the DJ and the loudspeaker all day up until the last dance, which at times was after 10. The music and the loudspeakers continued into the night. We couldn't go outside, couldn't sit in the garden, couldn't be on the deck. Went in my bedroom, I could still hear the music inside my house. We couldn't find a spot anywhere where we couldn't hear it. It was ridiculous. I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. It's ridiculous. It's a residential neighborhood. If this text change is allowed, and 81 Newgate can operate as a commercial venue, then I'm not going to live in a residential venue. I'm going to live in a commercial venue. And the proposed change requests an alarmingly vague number of events. What type of events? How often are the events? It's wide open. What's a holiday event? What's a family party? What's a festival? It could be anything, all the time. We will have no peace and quiet. And I'm concerned about the traffic. That's a lot of cars. We walk, ride bikes. Most of our friends have kids that walk and ride their bikes as well. People already drive a little bit too fast on some of the side roads. You can only imagine what a bunch of out-of-towners would be at late at night after a wedding. I'm also very concerned about the service of alcohol to guests, and then you leave a facility at night, talking 150 plus cars, not counting the caterers, the bartenders, the waitresses, DJ, photographer, videographer, florist, you name it. I hope they're included in what you're proposing. We're gonna have hundreds of cars in this event. After being served alcohol, driving on unfamiliar roads through residential neighborhoods. This is a real safety concern. We're gonna be living next to an open bar. I wanna remind, I just want to mark it.
Please
I want to
address the
remind the
commission.
commission that there was already one verified DUI accident as a result of commercial activities and alcohol consumption at 81 Gate. The planning and zoning commission was made aware, the fire marshal was also, and the first selectman. I want to be really clear. I'm not against farms. I love farms. I go to the farmer's market. I like livestock. I like horses. But the only thing that this farm is going to produce is brides and noise. They're not producing farming activities. It's a catering hall, it's music, it's alcohol, that's what it is. Please do not allow this to exchange. It's going to destroy my quiet neighborhood. No one's going to ever want to buy my house. I don't want to be in my house. And I wanted to retire. I love this town. Please don't allow this to happen.
Thank you for your input.
I have letters from other residents in the neighborhood.
Please submit those to the clerk.
Okay.
Yeah, next person, I think it's Aaron Renato or Eric Renato. Must be Eric.
Good evening, it's Eric Renato. I'm also at 37 Reality Road.
Are they not the same?
No, they're all different. These are all different people.
Are they just the same? Or are they
No, they're all different letters.
Okay.
People have written letters. I have emails as well.
Okay.
Good evening. I'll say it once again, Eric Renato, 37 Reality Road. Thank you. I'm against each of the text changes and special amendments being presented tonight for the Oxford Farm events. This is not only been proven as dangerous to our community and individual life safety, but also the quality of life to anyone who lives literally next to 20 acres of land in town. If you look at the Griswold rules, it's down to 5 acres of land. That's what they allow for certain events to happen on. These types of text changes are going to call for pop-up commercial scale festivals, large events that you've already heard are troublesome. So here's my first problem with everything. The person asking for the text change has been operating Halcyon Hill Farms, a concert and wedding venue since 2016, without permission of the town or the Pompano Health District or the state of Connecticut. This is bothersome to me. These text changes are not designed to help farmers in Oxford, but to hope for acceptance when permission was never asked for to open a concert and event venue in the middle of a residential area. They are now trying to get approval for the unpermitted and never approved structures that were developed on destroyed wetlands and forestry land they own at 81 Newgate Road. I live on Reality Road. I hear mic checks at 10 a.m. on Saturday mornings. I can hear them inside my home, as my wife has said, after 10 o'clock, doors closed, windows closed. I live a half a mile through the woods. I hear, there comes the bride, I hear it fall. It was because of that night that I went on Monday, down and saw the CEO for the first time to make a complaint in person. It was later that day I found, actually part of what had gone on is I was instructed to send a letter to the town about my complaint, which I did. There was an extraction on that first night from the Oxford Fire Department. This was loosely talked about already, that the vehicle had left. I made documentation showing, but I have a drone and I was able to take pictures and see what was going on behind my house. Drones take great pictures. One of those images showed me the same truck that the Oxford Fire Department had pulled somebody out of an extrication. The reason why I mention that is because when I was 19 to the time I was 21, I lived here, actually grew up here, came back here. I was an EMT on Oxford Ambulance alongside Paul Schreiber, policeman now Dave Ives, and you guys know Gordon. Granolini. We all run Oxford ambulance together. I can't tell you how many times I pulled people out of cars for DUIs or other stupid things they shouldn't be doing because of driving on back roads they don't know. We already know this has happened here. This is gonna happen again. I'm fearful history's gonna repeat itself. The owners of Newgate Road under the radar of health and safety, and the town and state officials have been operating a fully commercial functioning event venue without permission for 8 years. These text changes are completely self-serving and not in the interest of Oxford farmers. Why would I trust the same people to adhere to the changes they are asking for when they never followed the code to begin with? I went to the town hall to register my complaint immediately when I found out what was going on behind my home. It is because of my actions, the owners of 81 Newgate hired an attorney to present these text changes to save their assets. This is about self-preservation and forgiveness, and not providing creative ways to remarket land or promote economic stability for farming and agricultural business. The town of Morris had to shut down an identical venue last year. It's already happened outside of Oxford. It happened in Morris. In the town of Columbia, which is 2 towns away from Griswold, they are experiencing the same thing we are right now. So it's repeating itself everywhere. We don't need to have this repeated. I don't approve any of these changes that are being presented. I'm against all of it, and I hope that this doesn't destroy my peaceful neighborhood. I'll submit to you my statement. We're going to get this done. Thank you.
Next one is Louis Renato. Okay, we'll move on to Leslie Alexander.
Thank you for hearing us.
Please identify yourself.
Leslie Alexander, 25 Reality Road.
Thank you.
For several years now, the owners of 81 Newgate, Halcyon Farm, have been running and profiting from commercial events without permits in our residential community. Now they are asking to change our laws to fit their demands. Here are some of the objections that I would like to raise with regard to this property located directly behind my home. And I'm reading the letter so that it will go into the notes. The sound from these events comes straight into my home. At night, the bass of the music shakes our very bedroom. The amplification of voices over loudspeakers is disturbing and counter to the town's noise ordinances. Before and after events, large numbers of vehicles unfamiliar with our country roads pour into our streets. I worry about attendees and their alcohol consumption as they try to navigate our twisty, mountainous roads. Our neighborhood is a quiet, residentially zoned area. The character of the community would be greatly impacted if commercial properties are allowed to move in. The owners of this property have not ever acted in good faith. Many of the zoning and wetland regulations that the Oxford town already adheres to have already been. I am extremely hopeful that the Planning and Zoning Committee will understand the hardship and the disturbance that our neighborhood would undergo if this text revision is passed. It would open up the doors to the destruction of many of our quiet residential communities. I'd also like to add, farmer. My friends here in Oxford are farmers. They survive. This is not about farming. It is not about tending to animals or growing strawberries. This is about a commercial enterprise that seeks to make money on the backs of the residential people in this community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your input.
Next person is Lenny Alexander.
Way to go.
Hello, my name is Lenny Alexander. I live at 25 Yale Road. My wife and I moved to Oxford 20 years ago. We found a beautiful home, quiet, something to spend the rest of our lives. As we were living here all that time, it was wonderful, we had no stores anywhere, it was like, wow, this is really heavy. And suddenly, last summer, we noticed it got very loud on weekends. We heard it in the morning, we heard Here Comes the Bride. It got loud, it was difficult, as my wife said, the music was there, and she in particular had a difficult time sleeping. I also found out that a lot of what was being done without permission from the town. I found out that finished. My biggest concern is the driving under alcohol. I see a lot of people on these roads. I've seen way too much alcohol, too many accidents. It's one of the scariest things about living here. I'm hoping that this group of people can see right that this is not in the best interest of this town. But I'm confident that you will be able to see the needs of the people of this town, and what we've been doing, rather than just desire to have more money. Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for your input.
Next person is Donald Palace.
My name is Donald Hallis. I live at 25 LaGuardia Road in Oxford. I've been a resident of Oxford for over 30 years. This is the first time I've ever addressed P&Z or any other Oxford Town Committee or officer. I do so because I've never before felt a threat to myself, my family, or my members as I do with this proposal. There are many reasons that can be used to legitimately deny this proposal. But I would like to address what is the most important to me and what I feel is the principal concern for all of us. I've addressed several times, and I'm going to say it again. Public safety. Oxford's residential roads are narrow, winding, hilly, and without sidewalks or streetlights. Some have very dangerous curves, drop-offs, and culverts. And there are generally rocks and trees only feet from the side of the road. These roads have already have more vehicles traveling at a higher rate of speed than they were ever intended. Most drivers coming to these events will be unfamiliar with residential rural roads that we're traveling on. There's a difficult bend in the road, only a few hundred feet west of the entrance of this property. There's a second one less than a quarter mile after that. This proposal will allow hundreds of additional cars on residential roads with events proposed possibly year-round. Most events are intended to occur spring through autumn at the same time of year that there's significant increase in the volume of cars traveling to Jackson Cove and Kettletown parks. Many of these vehicles towing boats on trailers. In addition, there'll be other support vehicles not intended to be on our neighborhood roads. Delivery trucks, workers, transportation, and other neighborhood vehicles. This increased volume is assumed to be mostly occur in short periods of a wave, approximately 1/2 hour before and after events, possibly more than one a day. Impaired drivers. It's naive to believe that a significant number of drivers of these cars leading these events will not be impaired from alcohol served at the events, particularly those served from an open bar. My residence is 1 mile west of the property, yet the short and narrow road we live on will accommodate most of the vehicles traveling from the east or west and north. Residents of Newgate, LaGuardia, Maple Tree Hill Roads in Oxford, as well as Georges Hill Road and Kettletown Roads in Southbury will share the burden of this potentially deadly traffic swarm. It was only less than 20 years ago that my road was a dirt road. In that time, the only improvement has been to pave it. No addition, no widening, nothing else, just to pave it. In 2018, Planning and Zoning put out this plan of conservation and development that was mentioned before. And I'd like to make 2 quotes from it. One of the goals stated is improve the street system to assure safety of motorists and pedestrians. However, all improvements to residential roads should be consistent with maintaining the rural character. I don't believe this goal is
possible, allowing a commercial endeavor to vastly increase traffic with miles of residential roads surrounding it. The same document recognizes roadways on this side of town are inadequate even for the use of residents. Page 63, and I quote, "The road system west of Route 188 is particularly inadequate. Access to many areas is indirect and circuitous. Some of the principal roads within this area, such as Good Hill Roads, will need to be improved to accommodate increased levels of traffic resulting from residential development." You will note the concern doesn't even consider the additional burden of commercial activity in this area. Finally, regarding these two quotes, from the planning and development, I'm encouraged that 4 of the current members of the P and Z were on the board when this report was produced and are noted in that document and are aware of its findings. I'm confident that your concerns and issues regarding the public safety of Oxford residents has not diminished and that you will still act accordingly on this issue. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your input.
Next one is Todd Romagna.
How you doing? Todd Romagna, 28 East Street, Oxford. Thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight. I was on the other side of this table with you gentlemen for a few years, and I know what it's like when there's a full room and you have some importance in front of you. I'm just here to speak on, I was going to come with a long statement tonight. I thought, you know what? I just need to simplify it a little bit for myself, maybe for you as well. When I look at what the board's job is, and when I was involved, and I looked into the regulations quickly, and I refreshed my memory, when you look at like enforcement of what we're supposed to be doing, the first 3 sections, say, attempt to remedy, attempt to remedy, attempt to remedy. And then you get into cease and desist and litigation, which nobody wants to do. But when you look at those first 3 steps, attempt to remedy, I think your hands are pretty tied as far as, I encourage you to look at this and pass this, to have something to enforce. Because right now, as you said in the parking regulation, John, what are people supposed to do? They don't understand that parking regulation. And I say the same thing in this situation. What are people supposed to do? They don't understand what's going on. And, in this situation, I think versus others that I've seen in the past, you have an applicant who's very willing to try and make things accommodate whatever the board wants, to try and move forward in a positive fashion. All that said, I'm impartial as I did when I was on the board. And I remember when I was on the board, we had a gentleman that was coming to dispute the court about it. And he said, when they come out of this driveway, their lights are going to. And that struck me, like, this is an individual that's going to be affected by that. But then I laid out the big picture. I understood that there are going to be people that are affected by things that may be the right thing to do. And sometimes that's the negative portion of good decisions. But I do, and I took it into consideration. I take this into consideration. And I could really do it with some empathy because ironically enough, I live next to a farm. And if these regulations were put into place, quite frankly, they wouldn't necessarily apply because it's in a different town, but if they did apply, when I bought my house, I lived in Oxford for over 50 years. I bought the particular house I'm in right now about 32 years ago. And when I bought it, I said, man, that's what everybody wants, right? Everybody wants to come to Oxford, rural farm town, farm tech. And that's what I want. But I remember talking about, well, what if it becomes complex? What if it becomes that? And thought about it. It's just something we want to do. And I said, yeah, it is. And if that happens, then that happens. And that's the right of the farmer to do or whatever. He has the right to sell his property, and in this case, use his property. I just want to encourage you to kind of look at this as an opportunity to have guidance to this town. I think we have people that are going to be a lot of people that are for this, I know that, and I think that they need this tool to know how to move forward. And thank you for your time. I hope this goes.
Thank you.
Next person, Jerry Loescher.
I am Jerry Loescher, 94 Cliffield Road. Near this facility, I worry about children that have friends. Okay, and those roads are just horrible. They're not big enough for 2 cars. I've lived in this town 46 years, and that was a dirt road. And it was paved, with no other increase in that. And in the evening, you have to pull over to let another car by. And you want to pick up your kids from their friends, and you're gonna have people under the influence of alcohol traveling that road at 11 o'clock at night. That's all. I just don't agree with this proposal.
Thank you for your input.
Next person is Wes.
Good evening. Apologize. I'm Wesley Martos at 31 Whitegate Road. My property is somewhat adjacent to the applicant. And I'm father of 2, homeowner myself, come from somewhat of a agricultural farming background. And what I've heard tonight is I've heard a lot of people that seem to have specific grievances with one individual. However, what I heard or listening to this proposal is something that benefits the town as a whole. I think it's something that I heard one person tonight mention that, farmers survive. And that's ultimately what it is for a lot of people, is it's just survival. Well, I think if you look at the last 2 years, kind of taught us that we really need to rally around and support our local businesses, our local entrepreneurs. And if we have individuals that have property that are willing to step up and are willing to put in the work and are willing to provide us with the opportunity to grow our community as a whole, I think it's a good thing and I fully support it. I also believe that if it's something that us doing this forces us to address some of the issues like our roads, our infrastructure, whatever the case might be, it would be an excellent opportunity to build the argument for that. I know a lot of the surrounding towns benefited from this agritourism or whatever you choose to call it. They have roads very similar to ours and very similar conditions. So if they were able to do it for as long as they were, it benefited the community as a whole. Something that we should strongly consider and support for benefiting our community and hopefully moving us forward as well and supporting our local farmers as much as we possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you for your input.
Next, Rob Patmel.
Robert Pettinella, 6 Anthony Pond Road, Oxford. Thank you for taking the opportunity to listen to both sides. Personally, I'm in favor of it. I think I agree with the last gentleman. I think that this will benefit our town. I do agree that the roads are small, but honestly, things change, towns develop, and we need to move with the times. Now, that's not to say that certain aspects of the regulations can't be put into place to limit certain sound or light pollution or whatever have you. But let's be honest, we've done this already. The town did it to us, right? The town put a high school dead smack in the middle of a residential neighborhood. And not only is that high school put in the middle of a residential neighborhood, but ironically, it borders many homes that were built on Jensen's farm, a farm that went out because it couldn't survive. And 600-700 students every day go to that school, plus teachers, plus vendors, and what have you. We don't have necessarily issues. I understand there's a lot of emotion involved in this from the homeowners in the immediate area. I get that. But at the end of the day, we need to do what's right for the town as a whole. And I was a person at the time that didn't want the high school. I didn't think the town was ready for it. And in hindsight, I was wrong. It worked out perfectly. I'm proud of it. And I don't live very far from it. So at the end of the day, I would ask that you seriously consider this proposal, because I do think it's worth it for the town as well. Thank you.
Thank you for your input.
Next is Jonas Stereo.
Joan Syriac, 436 Quaker Farms Road. Apologize for the horse tonight already. I appreciate the opportunity to talk. Just here, I've talked in front of this commission years ago in the early 2000s. I was a developer here at the time. So I've been in front of this commission and other aspects of building houses and going on both sides of this. I've had people come to me and say that they don't want to have housing, they don't want to have certain activities in our backyard. I've dealt with that, I've offset that. I'm here in favor of this proposal tonight. The reason I'm here in favor of this proposal is because of the town charter that's right behind it, it's town seal. If you look at our town seal, it does say that there's oxen. We are an agricultural community. We always have been. I know there's a lot of people in this town who have moved into this town that sold them a lot of houses that want this town to be Westport. They want this town to be Norwalk. It isn't. It's Oxford. It was grown up as an agricultural town, and it still needs to remain as an agricultural town. A couple of the issues that were presented here, keep referring to this farm as a commercial facility. I'm sorry, this isn't Villa Bianca. I think everybody has to step back and take a look at Jonas Syriac at 436 Quaker Farms Road has had parties with 150 people, and I only have 5 acres. I've had TJs there. I've had caterers there. Does that mean I'm a commercial facility? This farm, I've been to some of their events. My daughter used to work doing horses there. It isn't a farm that's just doing weddings. They have something like 18 or 20 horses, Mark, correct me?
Please address.
I'm sorry. 18 or 20 horses that are sitting in the barn. My daughter used to go there and muck out the stalls and work the farm. I've gone there on several occasions and helped raise the hay bales. He sells hay. I've bought hay from him as a contractor. So to say that all he is a wedding venue is incorrect. He's not a commercial fish. He doesn't have the facilities as a large building or large. People come in, if I'm gonna go get married at this facility, I have to rent my own tent, rent my own tables, rent my own chairs, and rent my own caterer, who is responsible for the liquor license, who is responsible for the health codes, and to make sure everything is set up correctly. The only thing this farm is doing is providing an agricultural use for our community. People want to get married on farms. They want to see the horses that are sitting along the stalls. They want to see the white fences that are all over. They want to walk over the bridge over his pond. Okay? I don't see that as a hurtful thing for our community. I think you guys, as zoning, planning and zoning, need to step forward and create a regulated use for his activity. He is a pre-existing farm. I'm sorry, he's been a farm longer than the residential zone that's there. In fact, most of his farm was part of that residential zone before they built the houses. Guys like me who built those houses. Okay, so we have to take in context. There have been people that have said this is spot zoning. I'm sorry, it's not spot zoning. That when the farm was here before zoning. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you for your input.
Tony San Angelo? Okay, Teresa Maltese? Okay, then that's it on this list, unless anybody else wants to.
Does anyone else in the audience have a comment? Please come forward. Your name and address, sir.
My name is Phil Santini. I live at 33 Whitegate Road. My property directly abuts this farm. I'm totally in favor of this amendment. I've never had any issues with sound, and trust me, I go to bed early. I've never lost a wink of sleep. You know, I listened to a lot of what the opposition had to say about the roads. The roads are what the roads are. I don't see how you can hold the quality or lack of quality of the roads against this farm. He doesn't take care of the roads. Again, as you know, other people state, farms have to survive. They have to do what they have to do to survive. You know, I would just like to, again, state that I am all in favor of this. And I really hope the commission really considers what this is all about. Thank you.
Thank you for your input, sir. Is there anyone else? Please, sir.
Michael Wallach, 224 Moose Hill Road and 12 Moose Hill Road also. I farmed that land that I live on. I've lived there all my life, and I'm not young. I've been around a long time. And I've seen Oxford leave all its farms and build houses, and it pained me for a lot of years. But it was growth, and I can't stop growth, and you shouldn't stop growth. But that doesn't mean that we should forget about our farms and our farmers. My concern would be that if you do any changes with the regulations that have to do anything with farms, that you keep them in support of farms. I farmed that land all my life where I live, and I'm proud of that place. And I'm proud that a lot of people enjoy it. I've had a lot of people stop by and say, this is a beautiful place. I try to keep it clean along the road and well mowed, white fences. And people really appreciate the place and they enjoy driving on this road. That being said, I would just hope that you would write any regulations in favor of farming. Don't make it detrimental and hard for other people that want to continue farming or get into some type of farming. My concern is that somewhere in the loopholes of these regulations, we're going to make it hard on farmers. And I support the farmers and hope that you do also. Thank you.
Sir. Thank you for your input.
Betty Nolan, and we have 33 Hawley Road in Oxford. Lived here for 30 years. I support this regulation change because I believe in 2022, the small family-owned farms of the type we have in Oxford are in danger of dying. And they need to be permitted to do what they need to do to survive. Agritourism and things like that are a key part of supporting this type of farm going forward. I would also like to say that for 30 years, I lived across the street from Colonial Tavern, which had weddings or mitzvahs. They had summer camp there, the entire 8th grade. Every year, right before school ended, had a very loud party at their swimming pools. And I heard it all. I am directly across the street from them. You know what? It's nice. You go out and you're working out in the yard in the summer and you hear some bands playing some music through the trees. It's nice. I heard the wedding march played on bagpipes. It was fantastic. You get used to it. It's really not a huge inconvenience. It mostly happens during the day at this kind of place, if Colonial Taverns any example. And get used to noises. When I have people who live in cities come and visit me, they complain about how loud the frogs are out here in the country. And I never even hear them anymore. You will adapt. It won't always be a huge deal. And we claim to be a rural town, and I believe the report that was done a couple of years ago said one of the key things for development of this town is supporting and maintaining its rural characters. That means supporting the farms, because you can't separate the two. And saying that a farm is only about growing strawberries or having a handful of chickens condemns farmers to a life of poverty. And people who sometimes say, well, I farmed and it was fine, was that your sole source of income for your entire family? It's a completely different thing when it is. So I support changing the regulations.
Thank you for your input. Is there anyone else in the room before I go to the people that are online?
My name is John Scoto, I live on 162 Maple Tree Hill Road. A lot of stuff has been covered, but I gotta ask you a question. I'm a real estate agent. I'm bringing people into this town like you brought me in, right? Not just farms exist in this town, real estate. You brought me in, it was a great town, I love it, never had a problem, you set my kid and I got educated. But are you gonna be obligated now, when you sell a piece of property next to a farm, what you can do to that farm? Or are you gonna hide from people that buy a piece of property next to it and then find out it's worthless because now they're playing music all the time? Is there a law that you have to disclose what can happen? Because now my real estate's gonna drop, you're gonna reassess my property?
This is something that would refer to the attorneys.
Well, why is it attorney? Well, can somebody just answer? I mean, I understand this. Everybody's got problems. Society's changing. People need to make money. My home is my investment. That's my business, no more than his farm is. So you're gonna change my business by decreasing my value in my house, but you're gonna charge me the same amount of taxes? It makes no sense. Thank you very much, by the way. I appreciate you listening. It's just after a while.
Is anyone else in the room?
Can we get his name? Did we get that guy's name?
Yeah.
I got a second.
Yeah.
Hello, Kim Matthews, 130B Bowers Hill Road. I just wanted to speak in general about agritourism and how it's recognized by the USDA. I'm not speaking specifically about the issues that people have personal vendettas with today. I'm just speaking about the fact that Oxford in nature historically is an agricultural community. And within the agricultural community across the United States, agritourism is an up and coming form of economic income for farmers. That doesn't just include weddings. In the change to the ordinances, it's talking about equestrian events, the recognition of farming education. Our district feeds into Nanawag. You know, Nanawag looks for volunteer events, hours for these feed into our students who need hours at different farms or different venues. As Oxford has changed agriculturally, so has the agricultural community. So agritourism does need to be considered, it does need to be addressed because it's not something that's necessarily going to go away, but it might be something that needs to be regulated and involved. And that doesn't just mean weddings. It can mean other events where kids come to a farm, they learn about animals, they learn about livestock, and maybe do something in art that also involves that experience. Agritourism isn't just about noise ordinances, it is about experiences within an agricultural community. So something needs to be put in place for this, but as you're looking at it, I encourage you not to just look at it as do we encourage weddings or do we not? I encourage you to look at it as agricultural educational opportunities and what we're willing to be able to give to this area's youth and our equestrian athletes, as well as our kids who show cattle at the Big E. What are we willing to do and what are we willing to provide for people in this community in terms of agritourism? And I just encourage you to think about that as you're making your decisions. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. Is there anyone else in the room? Yeah, right.
The gentleman who spoke right before her, what was your name again?
My name is John Scoto. Thank you for listening to me. I appreciate it. It's a
Okay,
great place. It's a great
do we have
town.
anyone online that would like to comment? Do we have anyone online that would like to comment? Do we have anyone online that would like to comment? Hearing none. Okay. Okay, then I will take a motion to recess this public hearing.
Do you want me to respond tonight to comments?
I think there's a motion on the floor. I just prefer to close it. There's a lot to review and then you can respond at the next year.
Usually the applicant has the burden of the applicant to respond. I like to respond when the people are here.
You can do that. There's a motion on the floor to recess.
I can withdraw.
Is it permissible to have him come back?
It is permissible, but I think the commission should discuss that. We have a room full of people who may be appropriate. You're the technically responsible at this point. In addition, there were some letters that were submitted by the first speaker, Ms. Camaro, and I believe those should be read into the record because the people have requested that and what they've submitted. So
Maybe I could do that.
well, I think we should do that.
So send your.
Send the motion in, and then after we read that in, then can we consider that? The motion. Yeah, give
All right.
information.
I'll withdraw my motion at this time.
Okay, so we have a few, number of letters here. First letter, all these will be addressed to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Dear Chairman Quadrell and members of the P and Z, please accept this letter in opposition to the above mentioned text amendment to the Oxford Planning and Zoning Commission. Please read this letter in the upcoming public hearing. I live on Vic Hill Road in Oxford, and I oppose to allowing the text change that would destroy my quiet and safe neighborhood by allowing a loud and disruptive commercial event center to operate in the middle of our quiet area. If this text change is granted and 81 Newgate is allowed to operate as a commercial enterprise, my quiet street and neighborhood will be destroyed. What is this going to do to my property values? Who would want to live near a big noisy place? How will it be safe to ride bikes and walk? The high number of cars and requested text change is very concerning. These are going to be hundreds of cars on our residential streets after being at an event where alcohol is served. This is dangerous. We live here because it is quiet, a safe area, and our kids can walk and ride bikes. How can we do that if this is allowed? We cannot allow a commercial venture to have more rights than the people who live here. The text change is not clear as to the following type of parties, events. The change is even asking for it. It's too open-ended. We cannot allow this text change at all. Please do not destroy my peace and quiet and ability to enjoy my home and outdoors. Christine Loesch. This one is from Alex and Lisa Castellini. To whom it may concern, I would like to express my thoughts regarding this event venue in Oxford on Newgate Road. My residence is on Reality Road, and this past summer I could hear the music from the events that were being held. It has now come to my attention that the event venue would like to zone all-day events with louder music. I moved to a residential area for a reason. I do not want to have to listen to these events on a weekly basis and have additional traffic in my area. This letter is from Karen Rand. Please accept this letter in opposition to the above mentioned text amendment. I live in Oxford and I'm opposed to allowing a text change to destroy my quiet and safe neighborhood by allowing a loud and disruptive commercial event center to operate in the middle of our quiet area. If this text change is granted and 81 Newgate is allowed to operate as a commercial enterprise, this is from Karen Rand, but it's the exact same letter as one that I've already read into the record.
Who's it from?
Karen Rand, this one, and this one is Christine Loesch. There might be a form letter that people have just signed.
I know the signature, so you can read it once and just indicate who's the signature.
Right.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, while Bert was reading it, I just realized that a letter made reference to 81 Newgate Road. And this isn't, application is not for 81 Newgate Road. It's a text amendment that is not particular to
Correct.
any piece of property. So that one, I don't know if there are
I think
any,
the point is that towards the amendment and also.
but the application, I'm saying, I don't think that they should be confused. This application is not for, I mean, I think it's been pretty broad with the comments, but I think written correspondence in the record, you know.
I think you can read it in. That goes to the late substance. It's opposed to the activity that would be there.
But there's no
It's opposed to the actual text amendment.
I think the commission could
Make that.
make the judgment and determination based on they know their job. It's a text amendment, and that's what we're dealing with. The lay people are going to write and be concerned about the properties that are concerns to them. And that's just the way it is. We have to sort that out.
Yeah, so I've already read the the letter into the record, but Karen Rand signed a similar letter, as well as Albert Rand, Amy DeRosa as well. David Gassner, same letter. Jared Moser, same letter. Same. Yeah, and essentially that from Mary Ann Granato is the same letter. And Louis Granato essentially is the same exact letter, so.
How many letters you got this day?
What's that?
How many letters you have?
Nine letters.
Nine
letters.
Those will be in the record, so we can review.
So now it's,
At this point, would you prefer to take some time to digest all this information that was presented and speak at the next?
I can do that, but I'm responding to some of the comments that have been made, so that people might not be at the next meeting, so I started with third, I respond. Tonight, but I'll be glad to respond at the next meeting. I'm sure Jim Wilson will probably be back at the next meeting, but I'm going to respond to anything he did. Would you rather I do it that?
I think so. We've heard a lot, and
Just don't want them to think I'm avoiding them.
that's, if we take the statement, you're not avoiding commenting, you are reserving your comment until the next point.
There's a lot of people here right now. I think I'd like to hear what in response to everything that's going on.
I would move that we recess the hearing right now. Second.
I just think you should be able to respond to everything that's going on.
Okay, I have a motion, however. Do I have a second on that motion?
Should we say?
Yeah.
That's like, you're just getting tired here.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Online. Dan?
Dan, do you want to recess or do you want to hear Dominic?
Yeah, I'm sorry, folks. It was kind of all garbled up, so I didn't hear the discussion. Mr. Chairman, just if you could just relay it to me, please, what's going on here?
The question on the floor is to recess now or to have Attorney Thomas speak now and then recess.
I would vote to recess.
He wants to respond.
He votes to recess.
So Ed, are you still here?
I'd like to recess and have him come back the next meeting.
That's the vote is to recess, so now I need the motion to recess. Okay. Okay, I'd like to convene from our recess. Next item on the agenda is any amendments to the agenda. Okay, moving on. Audience of citizens for items not listed on the agenda. For anyone that has something that's not listed on the agenda. Okay. Do we have any correspondence?
Yes. Yeah, there's. Agenda. Here it is. Okay. The newsletter.
The newsletter, yes.
Or not the annual, the winter newsletter, and then there's a letter from Fran. I think for a final bond release on Riverbend Estates.
Okay, isn't that listed under,
Oh, that's correspondence at the end.
yeah,
No, that's right. Riverbend Estates. Under correspondence.
Is that the same thing that's been?
No.
It's a different.
Riverview. We gotta find the names. Riverview, Riverbend.
Riverbend supports you.
No, Riverbend's the one.
oh, okay, correspondence.
But they didn't want the curves anymore.
February 7th, 2022, letter from Attorney Theodosio to Mr. McCary regarding Riverbend Estates LLC, release of any bonds of acceptance of roadway, Mr. McCary. On behalf of my client, Riverbend Estates LLC, the request is hereby made for any final inspections or review necessary to allow performance and or construction bonds currently being held by the town of Oxford. The project for which the bonds would have been held is the Riverbend community located off Route 34 in Oxford. If you require any further clarity or information, please contact.
All right.
Okay, we have nothing under old business. Under new business, we have to schedule public hearings. Okay, we have two. One is for Z-22-031, owner 589 Investments LLC, applicant Sincere Esma Salami, I hope that's okay. 43 Eagleview Road, Southbury, proposed amendment to the zoning regulation, amend Article 9, Section 9.3 by adding 9.3.23. And the second one.
Chairman.
Yeah.
I think it's a little confusing because the amendment application number, to me, is confusing, especially when I'm trying to do it. Because the application is, I'm sorry, the amendment number is after the application number that would come under this regulation.
Same thing that. they're
Yes.
filing, I had some discussion. They had filed a request for a text amendment, and then the application would be filed under
Right.
that proposed text amendment. So we would have to address the text amendment first.
Right.
Even though it's
But
numbered.
when they,
Yeah.
but when they withdrew, we just gave them the same zoning number because they withdrew that application, then they paid the fees and everything.
Yeah, I think we can overlook it, just hold it.
Right, so maybe, but for the sake of the
You want to change the number?
agenda, I kind of wanna,
I would move that we.
I don't know what we could make it, what we could change it to without screwing up our whole.
Why don't we just change the applications to, just switch them out? We have two applications by the same applicant on the same proposed use in the same property. So I would move that we just authorize the administrative secretary to change those application numbers.
Just to switch them out, so that the amendment is the 019 and the application is 031. Okay, just for my, if that keeps me sane, I appreciate it.
Don't they have to file the actual text amendment though? And it's been contrary.
Yes, they did, it's, there was a clerical thing on the actual application. And so it didn't get in the packet, and I thought, just sticking the actual amendment in without the application.
Yeah.
So if you got time. Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. very well.
That's that for their benefit, so it doesn't get limited.
Okay.
So this is just a general, on this application for the text amendment. I know that a couple of the commissioners had some questions, so I was able to do a little bit of work on it. I think as it's, we need to get that text amendment in so we can look at it, but generally, there's a little bit more that there should be an amendment to the definition section, Article 2.
Okay.
At the very least.
Listed.
Yeah, and
Okay.
as it's a special exception, we have to do also amend Article 10. At least, and obviously, I don't know if the applicant has the same view that we do, but I think it's better to have more that we can take away what's not necessary than not give notice to the public of what we need and then have council say, you didn't put this in, you don't have a definition, and you have to start from scratch. You understand that? So I think we need a little bit more information in here than just changing the heading of a special exception.
We'll
Yeah,
talk to, we'll,
For the public notice, make sure everything's
Yes.
appropriate.
yeah.
Yeah, and I know there was some aspects of Article 10 that probably were overbroad, and, that's something that you can put a pen through, at least. Attorney Mitchell, it would be better to have more information and remove it than have not enough. Right. And then have to go back to open the public hearing up to add another substantive chunk to that. And then,
We have the notice requirements that, it will technically give someone a right to appeal if you were properly noticing the public. So it's better to have fuller information, if things will move along a little bit quicker, and then the commission can make a decision based on a complete package.
you'll have the opportunity to say you don't think this is necessary.
So did you set a date yet, a couple days?
Not yet.
So our next, we're obviously not gonna have time to do it on February 1st.
Right.
So, I mean, March 15th. So, you want to do it on March, I'm sorry, that,
Hang on.
you want to do it on March 15th?
Yes.
Won't have time, March 1st.
So you're not sure?
Nope, March 15th. All right,
so I have a
and,
motion.
I'll move.
don't worry about it.
All in
You
favor?
could have just called us.
Abstain?
Aye.
All
Oh, I'm in favor.
Business.
So, was that for both of them?
Yes.
Both of them hearing?
There were two motions were made, you just didn't hear.
No, you're right, I totally.
John and I second.
Both of
Okay.
them individually. Yep. All right, move to other zoning enforcement. Steve, is there anything new and different?
No, it's, no,
Unless you guys have anything for me. Have the minutes here, or,
You have everything except December 7th.
okay, so I have a motion.
So we have January 4th.
Yeah. Now you don't want anything longer.
Mr. Chairman, we have January 4th, anything from not December 17th?
You have everything except December 7th.
Three of them. But we do not have 12/7.
Okay.
So we can accept 1, 3, and 4.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes as presented dated November 16th, 2021. January 4th, 2022, and January 18th, 2022.
Do I hear a second?
Second,
All in favor? Aye.
I have to abstain, I wasn't able to read them.
Opposed?
They look,
Abstained? Okay. Motion carries. Okay. Let's see, we have the letter from Lisa Foster.
The next one, the invoice.
Oh, I'm sorry. Who do we have?
Map Young invoice dated number 007 lot 1R, Crescent Run Road.
Lot one of our festival.
I'll make a motion to make payment in the amount of $340 for the invoice as read.
Do I have a second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Carries. I don't have this letter. She's been there a couple of times.
Who's that?
The Lisa Foster letter.
Yeah.
That's,
Actually, Kevin needs to comment on that.
There's that and, we have to talk to Jim.
Is this something I need to read?
No.
No,
It's been referred to me and we still have additional information from the engineer.
you know, once these roads accepted and the bonds on here.
So basically, we need to find an inspection by the engineer, we could say.
Okay.
Meadowbrook and.
Meadowbrook.
So what do we got? We've got Riverview Drive, which is the old, is that the Fukuoka?
Yes.
Town engineer. Tells us we're all set.
Does he have it?
Yes,
Okay. Meadowbrook, he also has.
yes,
And what's this business with,
now that's Riverbed.
Riverbank?
So that's gonna be a new one that we're gonna send to him, take a final inspection and give us the information.
Okay.
Recommend closing it out.
Okay, so can we make sure that Jim Galligan gets that one also?
Yes,
And
it just happens, I guess it's good, they're all done.
that was the request that you got, that we, about the bond that hadn't been done for
Yeah, Moose Hill Estates, that one.
that.
There was another, there's some.
Riverbed and Riverview, right? Riverview is supposed to be over.
Riverbed is,
Riverbed is.
This is private one. One Haynes one.
Sorry,
Riverview
what's
is
that?
over 55. Riverview is.
It was Tawana Hill or Tawana Woods,
Yeah, whatever.
and they changed it to 55, and they're like single houses, aren't they?
No, yes.
Cadbury Estates.
No, not,
You're talking about Jeff Westbrook?
Right.
Can't, I'm talking about Canterbury, this is on 34.
No,
It looks like a little,
Yeah,
remember they
that's
lined the little
Riverbed.
sidewalks? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I said.
Okay, so I didn't hear the rest of the discussion.
There's Riverbed and there's Riverview.
Riverview was down with the Bocho
Yeah.
properties, two properties. He was gonna take out a bunch of fill, but then he passed, and
Right.
the daughter just
Yeah.
wanted to get off that,
Like,
and
yeah.
really just like two houses, 2 lots.
Yeah.
Versus like 5 or 6.
There's no filtering.
Nothing. They were proposing a ton, but that.
Yeah, we decided that we wanted a re-inspection by the engineer. Yeah, but then we started to reach by November 21st. I don't know. Yeah. I haven't heard from. Oh, good. That's still waiting, wetlands action.
What's that?
Hunter's Farm.
Is that some,
Yes.
They're still waiting, with wetlands, there is a consideration that they make their vernal pool for the property, and that's told by the wetland experts, why not with the wetland experts. That vernal pools can only be determined in springtime, so it's probably gonna take them to that point to do that. And based on that, it's gonna be a determination whether there's gonna be a sufficient space for crossing and adding additional lots, and they can't really do anything until they determine what's gonna happen with the wetlands. The wetlands may eliminate additional lots.
There's a lot of zoning stuff that has to be addressed too, so he's under a cease and
And you're, yeah, that was the clear cut,
Yes.
right? Yeah, so the cease and desist is pending.
Yeah, as soon as
You have a
that
plan
gets
in
approved,
range.
he's gonna come to us, there's a lot of, we have to sit down and go over a lot of the excavation, section 14 and all that stuff. Someone's in court right now for a $20,000 fine for clear cut. Some, one of the cutters.
When you clear cut and you hit that state forestry, there's a series.
Trouble damage.
Yep, correct.
Yes.
That's gonna be a while before it's resolved.
I know I'm not sure. We did get the invitation to that, seminar, or the, hanging out with somebody who knows what I'm talking about,
Seminar?
the annual
Oh, the thing that,
dinner.
Yeah, no, I didn't see it.
Yeah, no, I have it.
Oh, okay.
I was just gonna email it to you guys.
Yeah, email it to all of us.
I just want to,
Worth going to.
I'm gonna email it to you tomorrow, but seriously.
Council,
You're getting louder.
Motion to adjourn. All in favor? Opposed, abstaining, control. You guys online, thank you.
Big smile. I heard you, Pat, I heard you. Thanks, Pat.
John.
Still not the latest.
I haven't been here past 11.
All right, Dan, good night, I'm signing off.
All right, thanks, good night.
Have a good one, I'll talk to you.
Yeah. Have a good night. You got this.